What's going on, you guys? Welcome back to the Neighborhood Podcast. One of the hosts of the podcast. My name is Kyle Dabro. So, for this live stream, I'm switching things up a little bit. I'm going to do our NFL power rankings on a live stream. So, a lot of the times that I've done these NFL power rankings, it's mostly just been something that I've recorded, first thing in the morning and then I upload it to YouTube. But I'm going to switch things up a little bit and I'm going to start trying to stream these if I'm actually available to do that, just because, if there's any sort of chance that I can get to interact with you guys about these power rankings that I'm going to go over, I think that would just be really cool. So, we're going to go over our week 5 power rankings. We had a fantastic week 5 in the NFL. It started off with a great NFC West divisional matchup with the Rams beating the Seahawks in Seattle. Unfortunately, Seattle's quarterback Russell Wilson left the game with a torn ligament in his finger that he ended up getting surgery on, and we'll kind of see how that situation goes for Seattle. We had some great Sunday games that took place. We had a great Sunday night matchup that took place between the Bills and the Chiefs, where the Bills, they got revenge against the Chiefs from last year's AFC Championship game, and they beat the Chiefs pretty handily with a score of 38-20. And then week 5 was capped off with one of the best games that we've seen all year, and it featured the Indianapolis Colts going up against the Baltimore Ravens, where we saw Lamar Jackson pull off one of the best comebacks of the year so far with a 16-point comeback in the fourth quarter to tie it up at 25 apiece. They get the ball first thing in overtime, and Lamar marches them right down the field, and they end up winning the game by the score of 31-25. So those are just a few of the highlight games from this past week in the NFL. So what we're going to do here is we're going to go over who I think the top 10 teams are in the NFL at this current moment in time. We'll work our way down from number 10 and eventually get to number 1, and then we'll just kind of recap it from there. So with that said, you guys, let's dive into these power rankings, and I'll start at number 10. I'm going to start with the Cleveland Browns. I think the Cleveland Browns, despite the fact that they lost to the Los Angeles Chargers this weekend, they showed me that they are definitely a top 10 team in the NFL, simply just because they scored 42 points in a loss. So offensively, there's not much to criticize here as far as what Cleveland's offense can do. I thought Baker Mayfield had a very solid game against the Chargers defense. I mean, he went 23 of 32. He threw for 305 yards passing. He had 2 touchdowns. He didn't turn the ball over. And I thought on the ground, Nick Chubb and Kareem Hunt were just as effective. I mean, Nick Chubb had over 160 yards of rushing, and Kareem Hunt had over 60, and both of them combined for 3 touchdowns. And David Njoku was their main target as far as the receivers go, and specifically he's a tight end, but it didn't stop him from bringing in 7 catches, almost getting 150 yards of receiving, and adding a touchdown as well. So offensively, the Browns were fantastic. It's just defensively, they gave up 47 points to Justin Herbert and that Chargers offense. So there is definitely a point of concern moving forward with the Browns defense in that respect. But they're in a very jam-packed AFC North alongside with the Baltimore Ravens and the Cincinnati Bengals at the top of that division. And I definitely think that the Browns are going to be in that mix for possibly winning the AFC North this season. And I mean, if they get more performances like this, I think they'll be just fine. It's unfortunate that the Browns, of all the teams, they're the first team in NFL history to put up, I believe, over 500 yards of total offense, score 40 points, have no turnovers, and lose. It's just ironic that it just happens to the Browns, because the Browns are just known for their ineptitude over decades, since, the early 60s when they had Jim Brown back in the days. And even though that stat is ironic, I don't think it's indicative of this team. The Browns are a good team, and I think they need to be respected moving forward. So that's why I have them at number 10. So at number 9, I have the New Orleans Saints. The New Orleans Saints have been on a little bit of a winning streak the last 2 weeks. They beat the Giants in week 4, and then they followed it up with a nice road win against the Washington football team in week 5. So they won by the score of 33-22. And I thought Jameis played a relatively good game. He had 4 touchdowns in this game. Granted, he only completed 50% of his passes, But 4 touchdowns to 1 interception, almost throwing about 280 yards passing. That definitely boded well for the Saints in this win over Washington. And when I look at the Saints, it's going to be interesting whether or not that they will be that team in the NFC South that is going to compete for the top of the NFC South along with the Panthers and the Buccaneers. I'm still a little bit hesitant to really say that they're a legitimate force to be reckoned with in the NFC South just because I think the Bucs and the Panthers have an edge over them. But they've definitely shown me that they are taking the absence of Drew Brees since he retired after last season. They are taking it well. Jameis has shown me that he is not turning the ball over as frequently as he used to when he would play for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. But the main thing moving forward with this team is offensively, if Jameis just doesn't turn the ball over and the Saints defense can hold opponents to around 20, 25 points, I do think that it's a winning formula. I would like to see a little bit more production from Alvin Kamara, specifically with him carrying the ball. He only had 16 carries in the last game against Washington, but he is an absolute monster to deal with in the receiving game as well. So, I mean, overall, 70 yards on the ground with him, and then he had 5 receptions for 50 yards and a touchdown through the air. I think that's something that teams are definitely going to have to contend with because Alvin Kamara is definitely one of the best running backs in the league and definitely somebody to not be slept on. But the Saints have been on a winning streak, and I think they definitely deserve to be in the top 10, and that's why I have them at number 9. So at number 8, I have the Baltimore Ravens, and the Ravens are coming off one of the best wins of the week, in my opinion, simply just because this team looked dead in the water after the third quarter playing against the Colts, because the Colts were up 25-9 going into the fourth quarter, or excuse me, they were going up 22-9 in the fourth quarter, and then the Colts got a field goal in the fourth quarter to push it to a 25-9 lead. But Baltimore just came right back, and they mounted the 16-point comeback in the fourth quarter that eventually tied the game. And then Lamar Jackson, once he got the ball in overtime, marched them right down the field and was able to connect with Hollywood Brown for the game-winning touchdown. This was by far one of Lamar Jackson's best performances in his career. Arguably, this could be his greatest performance throughout his career so far. I mean, 37 of 43 for 442 yards, 4 touchdowns, and also, I believe he had 60 yards on the ground as well. He had over 500 yards of total offense just by himself. So, a phenomenal performance from Lamar Jackson, a phenomenal comeback for the Ravens. They do take a slight step down. It's not because that they didn't win. It's just that there are some teams that are ahead of them that I do believe are a little bit better than them. But look, the Ravens are at the top of the AFC North. This is not a team to be slept on. And Lamar Jackson should definitely get some MVP considerations at this point because he is by and large carrying this team after the amount of injuries that they sustained before the season, losing J.K. Dobbins, Gus Edwards, and Marcus Peters, all to torn ACLs before the season started. So despite all those injuries, they've been able to overcome it, and the Ravens just find new ways to win. I like Baltimore at number 8, and this is definitely not a team to be sleeping on moving forward. So after that, I'm going to focus on our number 17, which will be I'm just making sure that I have the right number here. Believe that we're going to have the Chargers here. So the Chargers are at number 7. And the reason why I have the Chargers at number 7 and I don't have them higher is because the Chargers had a phenomenal game against the Browns, but they did give up 42 points in the process. And look, the Browns are a very good team, and the Chargers pretty much did everything that they could to get this win. I mean, for God's sakes, they scored 26 points in the fourth quarter. That's phenomenal. And it was just one of those games where it was a back and forth game throughout the entire game, but the Chargers were able to come out on top and get the win. Justin Herbert has been nothing short of phenomenal this year. He has really taken that second year leap that I think a lot of people were expecting coming into the year. I mean, the guy threw for almost 400 yards passing. He had 4 touchdowns. The guy is just lighting it up on all cylinders. And, that's what the Chargers are sitting at 4-1, and they're at the top of the AFC West. And when I look at this team, just offensively, they have all the weapons that you can really have, or like they have just solid weapons across the board in not only Justin Herbert, but you got Austin Eckler out of the backfield. He's just a phenomenal running back that can be utilized for so many different purposes. He's great with running the ball. He's great out of the backfield as far as receiving goes. And then to focus on their wideouts, I mean, they got Mike Williams and Keenan Allen to go on top of that. And Mike Williams definitely had a bounce back game because he did kind of have a down game against the Raiders in week 4, but he follows it up with an 8 reception, 165-yard, and 2 touchdown performance. Mike Williams is just phenomenal, even though that I think the Browns forgot how to play defense against him because 2 of the touchdowns that he got, he was wide open by a mile. But you got to respect the Chargers. I don't think a lot of people were necessarily expecting that the Chargers would be at the top of the AFC West after week 5, because I think a lot of people had it essentially penned in that the Chiefs would be just the best team out of this division, but that has not been the case so far. And the Chargers are just a great team right now. And I think this is one of those teams where when I look at the entire spectrum of the AFC, I do believe that they are the second best team in the AFC. There is one team that is still ahead of them, and we'll kind of get to them a little bit later. But the Chargers definitely deserve this number 7 spot in the top 10 rankings this week, and they've earned it as far as I'm concerned. So the number 6 team, actually, let me rephrase this. Instead of having a number 6 team, I believe that there are 2 teams that are tied for number 5, and that is the Bucs and the Cowboys. So I just believe that both of these teams are as evenly matched as you can make them out to be. I'll start with the Bucs first, simply just because the Bucs had a great performance against the Miami Dolphins this past week. Granted, the Dolphins aren't that good of a team. You know, the Dolphins are sitting at 1-4. Tua's been out for the last couple weeks, and Jacoby Brissett has stepped in modestly for them, but it's not enough for them to really kind of get over the hump and start winning on a consistent basis. But the Buccaneers, they had a tough road game against the Patriots in week 4 where they only won that game by 2 points, but they just basically blew the doors off the Dolphins in week 5, where Tom Brady lit up Miami's defense for 411 yards passing, and he threw 5 touchdowns in the process. You had Antonio Brown and Mike Evans just pop off in this game. Antonio Brown, in some of these games where he really excels, it really does remind you of what he was able to produce for the Steelers when he was on his rise and on his peak, when he was just running and gunning it with Big Ben and that Steelers offense. I mean, the guy had 7 receptions for 124 yards receiving and 2 touchdowns to go along with it. You had Mike Evans, who had 6 catches for 113 yards and 2 touchdowns as well. And I thought Leonard Fournette was just a beast out of the backfield, not only with running the ball, but with receiving as well. I mean, the guy had 67 yards rushing, had a touchdown as well, but he also had 4 receptions out of the backfield. He has really kind of stepped up as their primary back, in my opinion. The Bucs are a good team. Offensively, they're good. Defensively, they have some issues. Most of that is due into part the fact that their secondary is just so banged up with injuries. I mean, that's why Richard Sherman got the start against the Patriots last week, just because they really had nobody else to go to, because you had Jamel Dean out of the lineup, you had Sean Murphy-Bunting out, and then that was just in week 4, and now you transition to week 5, you get Jamel Dean back, so you have a little bit of more stability in that secondary depth. But Carlton Davis is out for the foreseeable future. I believe he had a quad injury or a groin injury. I forget which one it is in particular. Sean Murphy-Bunting is still out with that collarbone issue. So the secondary issues are going to definitely persist with Tampa's defense. But the Bucs are a good team. You know, they're just out. I mean, they're technically a top 5 team in my opinion, and that's why I have them tied at number 5 with the Cowboys. And to talk about the Cowboys, I mean, the Cowboys, I'm just utterly shocked at how good this team is. Not only just offensively, because, you know, Dak, despite the fact that he just came off of a gruesome leg injury against the Giants last year, I thought that they would have been a little bit slow out of the gate, that they would have been a little bit inconsistent just to kind of get Dak Prescott up to speed, but that is not the case. Dak Prescott has been absolutely lighting it up in these first 5 games of the year, and he follows it up against the Giants with 22 of 32 passing, over 300 yards passing, and has 3 touchdowns as well. But the running game has just been phenomenal for this team. Ezekiel Elliott had another great performance. He is just having a rejuvenated season this year. And I think a lot of people were skeptical on what the season would go like after he just had a terrible performance against the Buccaneers in week 1. But he has gotten consistently better throughout the season so far. And that combo that they have with Ezekiel Elliott and Tony Pollard, that is just a nightmare scenario for defenses to contend with. And one of the unsung heroes of this Dallas Cowboys team that may not get a lot of shine, but I'm going to give them their shine, is the offensive line. The offensive line for Dallas has been phenomenal. They've been opening up tremendous run lanes for Tony Pollard and Ezekiel Elliott to run through. And they are giving Dak Prescott so much time to work in the pocket that he really hasn't been hit that many times this season. And really, just with the offense humming on all cylinders as it is, I mean, the defense has been just as good to a certain extent. Granted, they give up a lot of yards and they do give up points every now and then, but they are just turning the ball over. They're forcing offenses to turn the ball over consistently. And Trayvon Diggs is just one of those guys who's been at the top of his game for Dallas's defense. Trayvon Diggs has 6 interceptions in 5 games. I mean, he's only 4 interceptions from being in double digits as far as interceptions are concerned. And we're not even a third of the way through the season yet. So there's a very good chance that he's going to end up with double-digit interceptions this year. My advice to opposing quarterbacks is just don't throw to the guy. The guy's just in the right space, or the guy's in the right position at all times, and he's making plays happen. And it's just kind of indicative of this Dallas Cowboys defense. They're able to get a decent pass rush against opposing quarterbacks. They're able to get sacks. I mean, they're able to get turnovers, and they set their offense up in advantageous situations where that offense can put up points relatively easily. So the Cowboys are a very well-rounded team. They're definitely a top 5 team in my opinion, and that's why I have them tied with the Buccaneers at number 5. So number 4, I have the Los Angeles Rams. So the Rams, I had them when I was making my list. I had them as low as 7, but I was basing that off of recency bias, simply just because I think that some of the performances that we saw from the teams that I just mentioned earlier could have been higher than what I saw from the Rams this past week. But the Rams still beat the Seattle Seahawks on that Thursday night matchup to start week 5. And even though that I didn't think that Matt Stafford had his best game or his best performance with the Rams so far, he did enough to get them by Seattle. And defensively, they were able to force some turnovers against Seattle. Now, granted, Seattle did lose Russell Wilson, and they replaced him with Geno Smith, and Geno Smith is not that reliable of a quarterback, simply just because I don't even remember the last time that he's started for a team outside of when he was playing with the Jets. So it's been a long time since we've seen Geno Smith in a starting role or really seen him get significant playing time. So I think that definitely kind of made things a little bit easier for the Rams to contend with. But I mean, the week 5 performance that they had against the Seahawks was good enough to get them by. I do think that one of the highlights from this week 5 performance from the Rams was definitely Robert Woods. I mean, the guy had 12 catches for 150 yards receiving. He was just lighting up that Seattle secondary, and I think that was definitely worth mentioning as far as like just some standouts with this Rams performance from week 5. But no, the Rams are a good team. They didn't necessarily have their best performance in week 5, but I think they're still a top 5 team in my opinion, and that's why I have them at number 4. So at number 3, I have the Green Bay Packers. The Green Bay Packers got into a dogfight with the Cincinnati Bengals this last week, and I thought that the Packers were going to be a little bit more, they were going to beat the Bengals at a much higher score than I thought they would have, because I thought that the Packers would have won this game by potentially 10 points. But the Bengals really showed me that they could run it with a very good team with the Packers. But I thought the Packers were able to make the plays that they needed to when it mattered the most, except for Mason Crosby. I mean, Mason Crosby missed 3 field goals in this game in a row, and that's just a poor performance from him. But he was able to make the one that got them the win. I mean, a win is a win. Aaron Rodgers had a pretty solid performance against that Bengals secondary. But really, the standout to me was Davante Adams. The guy had 11 receptions for over 200 yards receiving and a touchdown as well. The guy's just phenomenal. Just the connection and the chemistry that Aaron Rodgers and Davante Adams have. It's the best quarterback wide receiver combo in the league, and it's not even close. These guys are just on par with each other. They know exactly how they want these plays to go, and they are just making the most happen. You know, that is going to be a deadly duo moving forward, and it always has been. So those two are very reliable, and they just make plays happen. You know, the Packers are at the top of the NFC North. I don't really see a lot of teams in the division really competing with them, so it's really kind of a one-man race in that regard. But the Packers are definitely one of the top teams in the NFC, and that's why I have them at number 3 in my power rankings. So at number 2, I have the Buffalo Bills. The Bills are the best team in the AFC at this current point in time. They put an absolute beatdown on the Kansas City Chiefs in this game. You know, they're coming off of a game last year in the AFC Championship game where they got absolutely annihilated by the Chiefs, and they definitely get revenge in this matchup against the Chiefs. I thought that Josh Allen was sensational in this game. Granted, he only completed 15 of 26 passes, but he had over 300 yards passing, and he had 3 touchdowns to go along with it. It's just phenomenal. I mean, the guy was completing passes on average 20 yards and up. So he was able to find those exploits in that Chiefs defense, and he fully exposed them in that regard. And I thought that, you know, even though that Stephon Diggs didn't have his best performance, he had a modest game, in my opinion, had 2 catches for 69 yards. But really the standout as far as the wideouts go was Dawson Knox. He had 3 catches, but he had over 110 yards receiving and had a touchdown as well. His average reception was 39 yards per catch. So he was definitely their deep ball threat, and he was able to just light up that Kansas City secondary. And I thought what was even more impressive was the Chiefs. It's not the Chiefs. Was the Bills' defense against the Chiefs? It just looked like the Chiefs were uncomfortable the entire night, and that was due into part what that Bills' defense was able to do. They were able to force 4 turnovers against Patrick Mahomes and that Chiefs offense, and they were able to get constant pressure against him the entire night. Granted, they only sacked him twice, but there were a lot of times where they were either at his feet or they forced him out of the pocket, and he had to throw that ball out to a wide receiver out in the flat or just had to throw it away. And it was just a phenomenal performance. You know, going on the road against a team like Kansas City, there's always that potential of the Chiefs just putting up 30 points just because when you have Patrick Mahomes, there's always that possibility. But I thought the Bills were outstanding this week. It's like I said, they are the best team in the AFC. You know, it's either them or the Chargers, in my opinion. But the Bills have just been a more consistent team this year, and they're just a more well-rounded unit, in my opinion. With the way that this offense is humming and with the way that the defense is playing, this team has Super Bowl aspirations in my mind, and I definitely think if they played their cards right, that they can definitely contend for a Super Bowl this year, and that's why I have them at number 2 in my power rankings, which takes us to our number 1 spot. It is still the Arizona Cardinals. Granted, the Cardinals did not have their greatest performance against the 49ers. They only beat them by the score of 17-10. But Kyler Murray was able to hit DeAndre Hopkins in the 4th quarter that put them up in the game. It was just one of those performances. It's a divisional matchup. And San Francisco played them very tough. And, you know, despite, you know, how close the game was, the Cardinals were still able to get the win and move on to 5-0 for the season. They're the last undefeated team in the NFL, so I have to give them their respect in that regard. You know, Kyler Murray has been sensational this year. He's just taken leaps and bounds from where he was last year, and I thought last year he was great in the games that he played in 2020, but the dude has just risen to a new level. You know, granted, I don't think Week 5 really indicated that, but he didn't turn the ball over. He didn't throw any interceptions, and he only missed on 9 passes. So, you know, all in all, you know, Kyler and the offense, I think they're doing fine. You know, I think just the only thing that we kind of have to keep an eye on with Arizona is that defense. They can be had. They can allow points at certain points at a time. But, you know, they had a great test the week before against the Rams in Week 4, and they largely shut them out. I don't want to say they shut them out, but they relatively held them to 13 points for most of the game. So the Cardinals definitely have some potential defensively, but that is really kind of the one concern that I have with this team moving forward. But other than that, they're still the number one team in my opinion. They have a 5-0 record, and you got to respect it. So that's pretty much all that I got for you guys. Like I said, it was a phenomenal week 5. I imagine week 6 is going to have some phenomenal games as well. I look forward to it. And that's pretty much all that I got for you guys. So with that said, if you guys like the live stream, appreciate you guys tuning in to watch it. If you guys want to support the channel in any way, shape, or form, hit that subscribe button below. Any sort of support that we get for the channel, Kevin and I definitely appreciate it. Just once again, just thank you guys.